Good morning.
Good morning.
Mrs. Baker, can you hear me good? Hello, neighbor. Okay, good. I was invited to preach by Pastor Mike because, of course, he's going up north this weekend to share in some fellowship with his family, and my brain cells were kind of dead at the time, and I couldn't think of anything where to go. Just like he had shared here a while ago with him trying to come up with sermon messages and stuff. But Mike had a sermon that he had shared, I think, in the past, and shared that with me. And I'm just going to pretty much reissue the sermon that Mike had written. Before I do that, though, I just want to ask a couple of questions. First, as an American citizen, is there anything that frustrates you from time to time? Pardon me? Yes, of course, yeah. One thing that irritates me to no end, and I understand it's part of freedom of speech, but is when people want to burn our flag. And that just gets me. And things have happened in our country here that I have some issues with, and I try to understand. But I have to tell you, I watched on the news the other day, there was a group in New York City that proclaimed that they were going to go out and burn flags and desecrate them and this, that, and the other thing. And that's our country. They have that privilege. And so that was really traumatizing me. And then the other night on the news, the citizens, God bless them, in New York City came out in force, 10-1 to the flag burners. And the people went to burn the flags, and the true American citizens came out and took the flags from them, and they weren't able to follow through with their wishes. And then the good American citizens in New York City chanted, USA, USA, USA. And that's kind of the basis of the message this morning. What we can do as citizens, and the importance of us as Christian people to step forward. A lot of people have a mistrust for our government and the way the government is performed. And it used to be back in the beginning, in George Washington's time, when he was president, people respected, and we had that initial love of our country where, we had to stand up and fight for the things that we wanted. And we've wavered, we've gotten away from those things. Because there is an overall mistrust of government, interest in civic responsibilities and service groups has also declined. And this is a shame, because the only way negative perceptions of government will ever change is by having good-hearted people involved. When people like you and me, people of integrity, Christians if you will, get involved and serve, we bring our ethics and principles that we've learned into the public service. Then, and only then, will negative perceptions about government change. As people of faith, I believe that we do have a civic responsibility to our nation. Paul had that same belief as well, and we see that coming through in his letter to Titus. Now, we don't know a lot about Titus, but what we do know indicates that he was a strong and faithful leader. I watched a movie here, American Sniper, I believe it was called. And in the opening of the movie, the father's sitting down with his sons, and he's talking to them, and he talks about there are three kinds of people. There are wolves, there are sheep, and there are sheepdogs. And basically, he was proud of his oldest son and calling him a sheepdog because at school, his little brother got whooped up, and the older brother stood up for him, and he took a whooping too, but he stood up for his brother. And that's what we need to do as Christians. We need to be sheepdogs. We don't have to be sheep. And I'll just throw out there Jesus going into the temple and cleaning out the money changers and stuff like that. As I've grown and matured in my Christian life, I think that more and more we need to take responsibility to speak up for things that are important. And a lot of times we've taken a passive attitude. It appears that Titus had the gift of being able to go into tough situations and make good come out of it. When Paul was being called on the carpet for his early ministry to the Gentiles, Paul asked Titus to accompany him when he went to Jerusalem to answer his critics. When the Corinthian church was at its peak in turmoil, Paul turned to Titus and asked him to deliver to the church the first of 2 letters that Paul would write to that congregation. Titus was a capable leader who brought positive results, and so it's not surprising to see him on the island of Crete in those days. The people of Crete had a terrible reputation. Its inhabitants were said to be lazy, dishonest, and immoral. So Paul sends Titus to Crete so that Titus could mentor to the small Christian congregation there and help lead them to be a positive influence on their fellow Cretans. Apparently, the island needed a good moral overhaul, and Titus was there to make it happen. Paul encourages Titus in his letter, and then he says this: tell the people to be obedient to their rulers and to be ready to do whatever is good. Teach the people to serve and do what is good, for these things are excellent and profitable to everyone. Let me read that again. Teach the people to serve and do what is good, for these things are excellent and profitable to everyone. Yes, Paul had the mindset that Christians had a civic responsibility to influence and serve their country, and we see that same mindset in Jesus. Luke tells us that one day Jesus was asked about paying taxes to Caesar. We read that scripture this morning. It was supposed to be a question that would get Jesus to stick his foot in his mouth. For if Jesus said that they shouldn't pay taxes, he would get into trouble with the Roman authorities. Luke says that Jesus sensed what his questioner was trying to do, and so rather than answer directly, Jesus asked to see a coin. You guys remember that story in the Bible. Whose picture is stamped on this coin? Said Jesus. Caesar, they all replied. Then give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. Although his answer is indirect, most believe that Jesus is implying that people of faith have a responsibility to support their government. On other occasions, we know that Jesus talked about letting our light shine. He talked about how we, as disciples, are to make a difference in life. So, given Jesus' teachings, I think we can safely infer that Jesus felt that people of faith have a civic responsibility. Unfortunately, most in the church have ignored their responsibility, and perhaps that is why our nation is in such a state of chaos morally. I think now, more than ever, we as Christians need to embrace our civic responsibility. We need to take the gifts and graces that God has given each of us and use them outside the church. As Christians, we can transform the moral climate of our nation. As Christians, we can influence governmental policy on a national, state, and local level. All we have to do is get involved, pay attention, and speak out. Our nation is a great nation, but we could be better in so many ways if more Christians would embrace their civic responsibility. So let me share with you some thoughts on that matter. I believe that one way we as Christians can embrace civic responsibility is to pray for our country and elected officials. Oh, I'm sure we do this once in a while, but not often enough. Our president and elected leaders, our military, our public servants, all need prayer. They need guidance and strength. So pray for them. Pray that God might bless them and guide them. Pray that God might keep them from corruption. Pray that God might find creative solutions to the problems that threaten to divide and undercut our country. Back when President George Bush was in office, there was a young lady married to a foreign service officer, and she had the privilege of shaking President Bush's hand as he was out doing a tour. As Bush, she writes this, as Bush was led away by his security guards, he went into the crowd to shake hands. It was here that Lindsay, the lady's name, had her opportunity to shake the president's hand. Now as Bush shook her hand, Lindsay leaned into him and said, "Mr. President, my husband and I pray for you every day." Lindsay would write these following words. He stopped dead in his tracks. Then he searched my eyes, as if to see how much I really meant what I was saying. Then he gave me the most amazing and unexpected personal response. For 20 or 30 seconds, he told me what the effect has been on him, waking up every day, knowing the challenges facing the country, and knowing that he is being faithfully prayed for. He almost pleaded with me not to give up, but to persist with it, for this is only the beginning. Then he looked me even more squarely in my eyes and gave me a very personal and specific series of instructions about the very things he needs prayer for. On behalf of himself and of the nation, he urged me that the threat against America is very great, and that one of our focuses in prayer to God needs to be the shielding of America, and for the wisdom for him as he leads the country through this time. I don't know why, but as I looked straight back at him, directly into his face, he let me see for those brief moments a tiny part of the agony he himself is going through, and the weariness. He finished the conversation by putting his hand on my right shoulder, almost as if it were the close of a commissioning, but affectionate too, in a brotherly sort of way. And then he moved on. As Christians, prayer is a simple way of exercising our civic responsibility. And each of us here today can do this. Volunteerism is another way that we as Christians can embrace our civic responsibility. As Paul said in his letter to Titus, we are to do good, and when we do good, everyone profits. Volunteerism does a tremendous good for our society, and some of you know this firsthand. Some of you are serving on community boards or agencies. Some of you are active in service organizations. Some of you volunteer at hospitals or nursing homes, work with the Commission on Aging. If you're currently involved in any of these things, if you're a volunteer, would you just stand up once so we can see all the volunteers in our small congregation? Dave's on a school board. Rocky, yeah. Food pantry people, Brenda's helped out there. You can stand up. Come on, stand up. Don't be timid. Don't be shy. 4-H or any other kinds of leaders that we have. You know, let's give a round of applause. Volunteerism gives us a chance to do good outside the church. Let's just remember that. We need to step forward and go out into the public and help out as much as we can. Being politically informed and active is still another civic responsibility that we all have. Our forefathers and mothers made great sacrifices to guarantee us the right to participate in a democracy. But far too often we ignore this precious right. We don't vote as often as we should, and many of us don't stay politically informed. We don't know what the issues are in our local and state and national elections. We sit in silence and let small coalitions at the state or national level